The day I finalized my divorce, I booked a high-speed train ticket back to my hometown, a phone, an ID card, and a bank card with a limited balance. These were all I had after all these years. The housekeeper called me saying I still had some items left to pick up. Just throw them away. I don't need them, I replied. He then mentioned that the little master was crying for his mom. He'll have a new mom soon, the one he's always been thinking about. My son really takes after his father, even in the women they love. I used to be sad, wondering why it couldn't be me. Now I think if he doesn't love me, then so be it. Before the train started moving, I said my final words over the phone. Tell him not to worry. I'll never bother him again in this lifetime. Chapter 1. After saying my final words, I turned off my phone and changed the SIM card. From now on, this city has nothing to do with me. Sitting next to me was a little girl about my son's age, with big round eyes watching me warily. I used to love children, but now I like nothing. The little girl was quiet and well-behaved throughout the journey. It was her guardian who was loud, talking on the phone and cursing nonstop. I put on my headphones and closed my eyes for a nap. I don't know how much time passed before someone gently tugged at my sleeve. I opened my eyes and looked at her.
Auntie.
My mom is missing. Can you help me find her? The little girl asked, her lips pressed together. The seat by the aisle was empty. I didn't know what had happened, so I immediately called the conductor and the train police. After an investigation, they found that the little girl's mother had gotten off the train midway. She had looked back wearily as she walked, afraid the little girl would follow her. In other words, the little girl had been abandoned. The carriage was filled with noise from the passengers' discussions. They spoke without restraint, right in front of the little girl, calling her mother heartless and saying how pitiful she was. The little girl sat quietly in her seat, motionless, neither crying nor making a fuss. I thought for a moment, then showed the train police my ID and left my home address and contact information. So when I got off the high-speed train, in addition to my phone ID card and a bank card with a limited balance, I also had a child with me. Chapter 2. I officially settled down in my hometown. I tidied up the desolate little courtyard, planting fruits and vegetables. I framed my grandmother's portrait and hung it in the center of the living room. I named the little girl Felisa, giving her my surname,
Song.
I completed the paperwork and got her registered. From then on, my household registration book was no longer a solitary page. Chapter 3. Feli never smiles. She always has a serious look on her face. Staring at me solemnly, she understands everything. Mature beyond her years, though she is only 4. She stands on a stool to cook porridge for me when I'm sick. I think of my own child, the Jiang family's little master, Benjamin, who receives an entire ski resort as a gift when he wants to ski, and an entire candy factory when he wants sweets. They're so different. Feli asked me why I adopted her. She said she was just a burden. I patted her head and answered, because I was lonely. So, can you keep me company? She looked at me, silent for a long time, then nodded vigorously. Okay, I'll stay with you forever. Chapter 4. The days passed by. Feli started kindergarten. Feli started elementary school. Feli became a class monitor. Feli got into a fight. I was very surprised when I received the call from her teacher. Feli is an obedient child, very mature for her age. She wouldn't even give her classmates an extra glance, let alone get into a fight. In her words, they were too childish. I rushed to the school. The teacher met me at the school gate, looking helpless. The child who fought with Feli is a new transfer student. Why did they fight? This was all I wanted to know. The teacher gave me a slightly strange look when she heard my question. What? Benjamin said Feli was trying to steal his mom.
What did you say?
I stopped in my tracks. The photo in Feli's pencil case of you and her, the teacher said. Benjamin saw it and said Feli was shameless for trying to steal his mom. I didn't say anything more. Following the teacher silently when we reached the office, the teacher turned to me. By the way, Benjamin's father is already here, standing at the office door. I first glanced at Feli, sitting in the corner, quietly doing her homework. Seeing her calm, I breathed a sigh of relief. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a little boy throwing a tantrum. When he saw me, his eyes lit up and he ran towards me on his short legs. "Mommy." I bent down, catching Benjamin. I didn't hug him, but gently pushed him away. "Little one, you've mistaken me for someone else." I smiled slightly, then looked up to meet the gaze of the man in the room. "Hello, sir. I am Felice's mother." Chapter 5. I never expected to see Lawrence again. The world is vast, and if you don't want to meet someone, you naturally won't. Benjamin cried loudly, accusing me of abandoning him. Feli gripped her pen tightly, and I knew she was getting a bit annoyed. Lawrence stared at me in silence. I knew he was waiting for my reaction. "Feli," I said, packing up her school bag. "Can you head home first?" Feli nodded decisively, slung her bag over her shoulder, and left without looking back. As soon as she was gone, Benjamin quickly wiped away his tears and ran over to hug my leg. "Mommy, please don't be mad at me, okay? I know I was wrong." I bent down, smiling as I patted his head. Then I looked up at Lawrence. "Mr. Zhang, can we talk privately?" Chapter 6. There's really nothing noteworthy about my past with Lawrence. When my grandmother was young, she helped the Zhang family by saving Lawrence's grandmother during a kidnapping. So over the years, the Zhang family always sent gifts during holidays. After I got into college, my grandmother was too old to travel and worried about me being alone, unable to adapt to the city's fast pace. She contacted the Zhang family and asked them to look after me. That year, when I came out of the train station with my luggage, I saw Lawrence leaning against a car, casually playing with his phone. He was so dazzling that I wanted to use all the beautiful words I knew to describe him. Falling for him was the most natural thing in the world. I knew we were from different worlds and never thought of anything else. The moon hung high in the sky, and I was already content to be bathed in its light as I passed by. Lawrence and I attended the same university. Occasionally, he would bring me some items on behalf of his elders. Over time, we became acquaintances. Later, I heard about Lawrence's love story with his childhood sweetheart. Their love was always entangled, with constant sweetness, quarrels, separations, and reconciliations. I was just a spectator, occasionally feeling a bit lost. In my third year, I started an internship far from the university, so I had to commute long distances every day. Once I ran into Lawrence and he casually asked how I was doing. I told him the truth. Not long after, I received a call from Lawrence's grandmother, saying there was a vacant house near my company and suggesting I move in. I couldn't refuse the kind offer and was very grateful. After moving in, I noticed traces of Lawrence's life everywhere, feeling guilty. I kept all my belongings in the guest room to minimize my presence until one night, after working late. I came home to find a drunk Lawrence passed out on the sofa. I wanted to avoid suspicion but worried he might catch a cold, so I brought a blanket to cover him. Lawrence opened his eyes and looked at me. I thought he was going to question why I was in his house. Instead, he pinned me down, and we made a terrible mistake. Chapter 7. Nowadays, I don't really remember much about that chaotic night. The human body has a self-protective mechanism. Sometimes, when things are too painful, they gradually fade away. In my life so far, I've only been with one person once, and he called out someone else's name. Thinking back, Lawrence has only ever called me by my name once. On the day we first met at the train station, he looked me up and down and said, "Julia?" "Yes, I am." If life were as it was at first sight, why would the autumn wind bring sorrow to paint it? Chapter 8. The campus was silent after school. Lawrence and I stood at the end of the corridor, a vibrant green backdrop behind us. "Didn't you want to talk privately?" Lawrence asked. "Say what you need to say," since he initiated. I didn't hesitate. "What have you been telling Benjamin these past few years?"
What?
"We've been divorced for 4 years. In these 4 years, I've kept my promise not to appear and have been sending child support to your account every month on time. Children's memories are short. Besides, Ben never liked me as his biological mother. If no one had been reminding him constantly, he wouldn't still remember me, let alone have feelings for me." Lawrence turned his head away. "I haven't said anything to him. It's his grandmother, Who's been reminding him? Then why the transfer? He's been clamoring to come find you. Lawrence paused. I couldn't stop him. Of course. Benjamin is the apple of the Jiang family's eye. Whatever he wants, he gets. Even Lawrence has no principles when it comes to Benjamin. I lowered my gaze, quietly contemplating. After a while, I smiled. It's fine. Once his expectations are shattered, he'll naturally want to go back. I've never been a likable person. Once Benjamin spends enough time with me, he'll realize that his memory has idealized me. In reality, I am still the unlikable, annoying biological mother who will only lower his status. Chapter 9. After returning to my hometown, I opened a small restaurant to make a living. Since I couldn't manage alone, I limited the number of customers slowly. It gained popularity and became a trendy spot among tourists. 18-year-old Julia wanted to be a successful woman making millions a year.
So she studied computer science.
28-year-old Julia only wanted to guard the small restaurant of less than 100 square meters and quietly spend the rest of her life. Since transferring schools, Benjamin would be brought to my restaurant by a driver every day after school. He's a smart kid who only showed his bratty side on our first day of reunion. Lawrence rarely appeared. Most of the time, the person accompanying Benjamin was the driver. I didn't understand what the Jiang family was thinking. They valued Benjamin so much, yet they trusted him alone in this remote small town. I didn't chase him away. He was the only blood relative I had left in this world. I once stayed awake for 3 days and nights to take care of him when he had a high fever. I once made toys for him by hand, injuring my hands in the process. I must admit, people are inherently selfish when I did those things for him. I didn't expect anything in return, but after all my efforts, I was somewhat hurt by his disdain, aversion, and dislike. When he was little, he was very attached to me. He needed me to sleep, and he needed me to carry him when we went out. I relied on his dependence on me to endure countless cold stares and grievances at the Jiang family. But as he began to develop his own will, learn to walk, and learn to say no, he gradually stopped liking me because I would stop him from eating too much candy and sternly educate him when he was being naughty. Children don't discern right from wrong. They only know that I often restricted him. So, naturally, he didn't want to be close to me anymore. Until one day after Lawrence took him out to play, Benjamin came home and boldly declared, I don't want you to be my mom anymore. I want Aunt Miranda to be my mom. You don't deserve to be my mom. Get out. This is my house. Chapter 10. Feli asked me privately if she could avoid being friends with Benjamin because she didn't like him.
Of course you can.
I didn't mind, but I was curious. Why don't you like him? Feli is a generous child. She rarely shows clear dislike for someone, usually remaining indifferent. He hurt you, Feli said calmly. You're always sad when you see him. I was stunned.
He knows you're sad.
But he keeps appearing in front of you, Feli continued, lowering her head, feeling a bit down. Can I hit him? I can't beat the adult yet, but I can beat Benjamin. Feli thought for a moment. Mom, can you send me to learn martial arts? I'll become really strong. Mom, I'll protect you. I agreed to send Feli to learn martial arts. She studied with great dedication, the master said. Your Feli is tougher than many older kids. I remembered Lawrence once mocking me, pointing at my nose. Who would ever love a woman like you? That's not true, Lawrence. Grandma loved me and Feli loves me, and now I love myself too. Chapter 11. Lawrence occasionally shows up, always arriving looking travel-worn. He sits in my restaurant, orders a couple of dishes, eats, and then takes Benjamin home. Neighbors ask if Lawrence is pursuing me. They don't know Lawrence is my ex-husband. They only know a wealthy bachelor is chasing after a divorced middle-aged woman with a child. I always laugh and deny it.
He's not blind.
Why would he be interested in me? He's here to pick up the child, not to court me. In the past, I would have speculated about the purpose behind Lawrence's actions. But now I have no curiosity about him, whether he comes or goes. It doesn't matter to me. Chapter 12. Sometimes I wonder when Benjamin will get tired of this trying to win mother's favorite game. He's been in a small town with no aquarium, no amusement park, and no big shopping malls for almost 3 months. Perhaps the saying the unattainable is always more precious is deeply ingrained in everyone, even children, the colder I am towards him. The more he wants to cling to me, he often shows a lonely expression. When I gently hold Feli's hand, when I bend down to straighten Feli's dress, when I bring out a special dessert I made just for Feli from the kitchen. But whenever I look at him, his loneliness disappears, replaced by a sweet smile. People's preferences change with their feelings. When I loved this child, any slight bump would make me feel bad for a long time. But now, even knowing he's pretending to be strong, I feel nothing. I even wonder why he hasn't left yet. His presence here is really quite annoying. I don't hate him. I just don't like him anymore. Chapter 13. Early summer had arrived, and after the closing ceremony, summer vacation officially began. That day, I opened the restaurant as usual, and by the time I closed in the evening, Benjamin still hadn't shown up. I assumed he had finally tired of the boring game and decided to return to his life as a privileged young master. But when I got home in the evening, I found him holding a delicate cake box, sitting obediently on the steps of a small courtyard. Lawrence was with him, accompanied by several gift bags. Their striking looks drew amazed glances from passers-by, but they were focused solely on what was in front of them. "Dad, when will Mom be back?"
Soon.
"We specially came to celebrate her birthday and brought so many gifts. Will Mom be happy?"
She will be.
Hearing this, Benjamin pressed his lips together and smiled with anticipation. He was dressed in a formal little suit, specially groomed, but the weather was hot, and perhaps he had waited too long as there were beads of sweat on his forehead. Or maybe it wasn't the heat, but his excitement. I stopped a short distance away. Feli, however, didn't slow down at all. She walked straight to the father and son, speaking crisply. "You're mistaken. Mom's birthday isn't today. You're lying." Benjamin rarely confronted Feli directly anymore. He knew I adored Feli and didn't want to upset me, so he usually tried to avoid interacting with her. But now he stood up fiercely, loudly retorting. "Mom's birthday is today. She and I share the same birthday. I wouldn't get it wrong." Lawrence saw me and also stood up. He didn't speak, but there was a hint of expectation on his face. "Julia," he called my name, awkward and unfamiliar. "Happy birthday." I walked over, pulling out my keys and unlocking the small courtyard gate while calmly looking at him. "I forgot to tell you, I've changed my birthday." After thinking for a moment, I added, "But this kind of trivial matter shouldn't concern you, right?" Chapter 14. I used to love celebrating my birthday. Grandma was a little old lady who loved ceremonies. Every year on my birthday, she would prepare a big table of dishes, a beautiful cake, and a delicate gift. There were only the two of us in the house, but it never felt lonely. She wasn't in good health and couldn't travel long distances. But after I went to college and couldn't be home for my birthday, she would always fly across the country to be with me, blowing out candles and eating cake. When Grandma was alive, I was never lonely. That year, on my birthday, Grandma flew over to be with me as usual. I was in the late stages of my pregnancy with Benjamin. I didn't want Grandma to worry, so I had all my discomforts and lied to her, saying Lawrence was very caring. But in reality, Lawrence hardly ever looked at me. Even though we lived under the same roof, he treated me like I was invisible. At the time, I understood him. What happened between us that night was a mistake. I even thought that since Lawrence was drunk, I could sneak away once it was over. If I didn't say anything, no one would know what had happened. But what actually happened was that Lawrence tortured me the entire night. Before I could regain my strength to leave, the door was opened by Lawrence's grandmother, who had come to visit me. She had brought me chicken soup, knowing I had been working hard. So things spun out of control. And there was no turning back. Lawrence's grandmother wasn't interested in the young people's emotional entanglements. She only knew that Lawrence had ruined my reputation and had to take responsibility. She didn't care if Lawrence had a lover, if the Jiang family was happy with me as a daughter-in-law, or if I wanted to marry Lawrence. She only cared about not wronging me or my grandmother. Julia, I've told your grandmother about you and Lawrence. She's not in good health and you don't want her to worry about you.
Right?
I can tell you have feelings for Lawrence. You're a good child. I know you don't want to ruin Lawrence and Miranda's relationship, but what's done is done. Miranda can't tolerate any flaws in her relationship with Lawrence, so they have no future together. But you and Lawrence have endless possibilities. Don't you want to give it a try? I have to admit, for a moment I was tempted. But before I could make a choice, I found out I was pregnant. The symptoms were severe, impossible to hide. So I had no way out. I had to grit my teeth, endure Lawrence's hateful looks, and start a marriage that was destined to be unhappy. Sometimes I hated my own deep-seated tendency to compromise. I had to act happy and sweet in front of the elders and indifferent in front of Lawrence. But in truth, I was not happy. I was in pain. Morning sickness was painful. Swelling was painful. Cramps were painful. Being despised by the Jiang family was painful. Being hated by Lawrence was painful. Being mocked by Miranda was painful. I endured it all and faced yet another birthday. Grandma was very happy. She not only prepared a gift for me, but also for her future grandchild. She said she wasn't leaving this time and would stay until I gave birth and finished my postpartum period. But Grandma didn't get to see Benjamin being born on my birthday. I took her out for dinner. She witnessed Lawrence and Miranda holding hands and kissing sweetly. Then she had a heart attack and ended up in the hospital. Chapter 15. My resentment toward Lawrence probably started around that time. I wasn't the one who made a mistake. I was the biggest victim. So, why did I have to bear all the consequences? As soon as Grandma was sent to the hospital, she was taken to the emergency room. Not long after the Zhang family arrived. Lawrence's grandmother slapped him hard in front of me, but I didn't want to stop her. I only stared at the surgery room, hoping the doctor would bring me good news. However, it wasn't long before the light in the surgery room went out. The doctor came out and regretfully told me to say goodbye to the elder. How ridiculous to say goodbye. My grandma, just an hour ago, was smiling and holding my hand, saying she had personally made soft clothes for her good grandson. And now I had to say goodbye. Lawrence's grandmother cried miserably, repeatedly saying she was sorry to me and to Grandma. I couldn't hear anything. I was just in a daze, gripping Grandma's hand tightly, afraid that if I let go, I would never touch her again. I know you're not happy in your marriage. You just don't want me to worry. So you say nothing. Grandma lay on the bed, looking at me with pain in her eyes. I'm sorry, Julia. Grandma can't be with you anymore, she cried in agony, choking on her words. Julia, what will you do if someone bullies you? What if no one is good to you? Who can I entrust you to? Don't worry, dear sister, I will take good care of Julia, Lawrence's grandmother vowed tearfully, pulling Lawrence to make him promise too. Lawrence knelt by the bed, telling Grandma, don't worry, Grandma. I will take good care of her. Grandma looked at him with cloudy eyes and smiled sadly. The biggest regret of my life was asking your family to take care of her. She clung to my hand, her eyes filled with reluctance to part with me. But in the end, she still left. She left with resentment, regret, and deep sorrow. I clutched my aching belly, and in the midst of my collapse and despair, I screamed through most of the night in the delivery room, giving birth to Benjamin, perhaps out of guilt. Lawrence rarely saw Miranda after Grandma's death and often helped with the child, though he still didn't speak much to me. At least we maintained a polite distance. Miranda went abroad because of her heartbreak and rarely contacted Lawrence. I thought my life would continue like this, stuck in an unhappy marriage with a husband who didn't love me and a lovely son. But then Miranda came back, and upon her return, she took away all of Lawrence and Benjamin's attention, all the family affection I might have had, and the love I never received. Miranda took without hesitation. On Benjamin's birthday, she said she had prepared a grand surprise for him. So Benjamin ran to her without hesitation, leaving me behind. Lawrence said that Miranda still didn't like me, so he wouldn't take me along. He promised to bring Benjamin back before sunset to celebrate my birthday with me. But that day they didn't return until after midnight. Lawrence called and said Benjamin was too tired from playing and had fallen asleep. He didn't want to wake him, so they stayed out in the silent night. I sat by the window for a long, long time. I thought of Grandma's last words, holding my hand and asking what I would do if no one treated me well.
Grandma.
I no longer like celebrating my birthday. Chapter 16. Out of courtesy, I let the father and son in and poured them some water. Felly took the calendar from the cabinet and pointed to a date circled in red. This is Mom's birthday. Benjamin looked at me uneasily, his eyes wet, wanting to speak, but not daring to.
They really were like
father and son, from appearance to behavior. It seemed like I had only provided the womb because there wasn't a trace of resemblance to me and Benjamin. Lawrence piled the gifts in an empty corner. This time it was my oversight.
Next time.
There's no need to prepare these next time. I interrupted. There's no need to come next time either. Lawrence's back stiffened, and after a long pause, he turned around. Sorry, can we talk privately? How rare it was for these words to come from his mouth. I made sweet drinks for the two little ones, turned on the TV to the children's channel, and then led Lawrence to the pavilion in the yard. This place is beautiful, Lawrence said, somewhat awkwardly. Thanks for the compliment. I got straight to the point. Please, say what you need to. I notice you don't have another man in your life at the moment, Lawrence said. If you don't mind, can we remarry? I stared at him, silent. Lawrence awkwardly averted his gaze. I just think we should give the child a complete family. Ben has changed a lot recently. He's not as willful and spoiled as before. So, aren't you married to Miss Miranda? Lawrence was stunned. Back then, everyone told me she was the suitable wife for you, Benjamin's mother, although you never directly said it. I assume you agreed, so I took the initiative to step aside. What? You didn't end up together? Lawrence couldn't withstand my gaze. His hands clenched and unclenched unconsciously. That's all in the past. And so are we. But we have a child. So what? Lawrence, stop using others as excuses. First it was Miranda. Now it's Benjamin. I smiled softly. Is it so hard to admit you have feelings for me? Chapter 17. I used to wonder how insignificant I must be in Lawrence's eyes for him to be so ashamed to admit it. Love is hard to hide. I never said I loved Lawrence, but my flushed years and racing heart betrayed me long ago. Our marriage lasted for years. I might have a tendency to please others, but if he had never given me a shred of hope, I wouldn't have lasted for years. I don't know when he started to like me, or how much he liked me. I just inherited the habits of my grandmother's generation when something isn't good. The first reaction isn't to throw it away and get a new one, but to patch it up and make it last as long as possible. The same goes for marriage. I thought, maybe Lawrence didn't dislike me that much. If I tried harder, maybe the marriage could get better. I desperately tried to find signs of his affection for me, hoping to gather these fragments of love to light my way forward. Eventually, I illuminated the path. The road was rugged, bumpy, and filled with nauseating stench. These fragments of love weren't enough to sustain me, nor did they bring any warmth. They only made me realize how unbearable this marriage was. I used to think maybe you had a strong moral sense and couldn't accept loving another woman besides Miranda. Later, I realized if you really had such strong morals, how could you still have an ambiguous relationship with your first love even after getting married? You're just selfish. You even used Benjamin missing me as an excuse to reconcile. But Lawrence, we've been divorced for 4 years. Lawrence swallowed hard, his voice hoarse. So, I'm too late, right? It's not that you're too late. I sighed softly. It's just that all of that is in the past. Lawrence, look forward. Lawrence raised his hand, covering his eyes. I knew his pride. Seeing him like this didn't bring me any satisfaction. So, I quietly got up and left him in that small space. Before leaving, he reached out and grabbed my skirt with great force. His knuckles turned white and veins bulged. He had lost a lot of weight, and there was a sense of unhidden desolation about him. I heard his suppressed sobs and saw his trembling shoulders. Don't come again, I said. Return to your own life and take Benjamin with you.
I pulled my skirt back.
Smoothing it out. I forgot to tell you, my birthday now is the anniversary of our divorce. That was also the day I found Felly. She didn't know her birthday, and I wanted a new one, so we decided to make that day our rebirth day. Consider it an early birthday gift from you.
Give me some peace.
Thank you, Lawrence. Chapter 18. Lawrence left, taking Benjamin with him. He didn't say anything, but Benjamin gasped. Before leaving, he clung tightly to my leg, refusing to let go. He cried miserably, his voice sharp and hoarse, his face flushed red, sobbing as if he were about to faint any second. I won't go. Let me go. I want my mom. He struggled desperately, begging me. Mom, please don't abandon me, okay? I'll be good and obedient from now on. I won't make you sad anymore. Please don't send me away. Dad, you're a liar. You said Mom would forgive me. Big liar. Big bad guy. Go away, Mom. The car door slammed shut, and I saw Benjamin crying and clinging to the window, banging on it with all his might. Looking at me pitifully, Lawrence pulled him away, holding him down firmly, and ordered the driver in a deep voice.
Drive.
He didn't look at me again. Not once did he turn back. Felly stood beside me, looking up at me expectantly. What is it? I asked gently, looking down at her. They won't come back, right? No, they won't. Mom, are you sad? I just smiled and rubbed her head. Felly, everything will pass. Remember, no matter how painful things are, as long as you keep moving forward with determination and without looking back, you'll get through it. I've already walked far ahead, but it seems Lawrence and Benjamin are still standing in the same place. But it doesn't matter. We were never meant to be on the same path, so there's no need to stop and wait for them. That night, I had a dream. In the dream, I returned to a few years ago, to when Benjamin was just born. I was so exhausted from taking care of him that I fell asleep on the sofa. In my days, it was Lawrence coming home late from work, who picked me up, carried me upstairs, and gently placed me on the bed. He brushed my hair away from my forehead and gave me a tender kiss. Good night, honey. At that moment, I truly believed I could spend my life with him. Later, I understood that a lifetime is too long, and no one can accompany anyone through it entirely. He was a passerby in my life, a vivid brushstroke in my otherwise calm existence. But that's all he was. Lawrence, you and I long ago, it was already the end for us. Epilogue 1. After Lawrence and Julia divorced, the atmosphere in the Jiang family was gloomy for a long time. The woman who was unwelcomed by everyone was finally gone, but the expected relief did not come. Lawrence, always a man of few words, spoke even less after the divorce. He was busy with work, either on a business trip or on his way to one. Even when he came home, he usually fell asleep immediately. Benjamin, on the other hand, seemed carefree, running around with the nanny every day and throwing tantrums whenever things didn't go his way. But one day, he suddenly asked, "Where's Mom?" The nanny didn't know how to respond. Benjamin was proactive. He looked under the table, in the wardrobe, in the garden, searching for a long time but finding nothing. Where did Mom hide? Children forget easily, but Benjamin was smart. He could clearly recall the last time he saw Julia. That morning before Julia left, she smiled, bent down, and patted his head. "Ben, Mom is leaving. I used to hope you'd be a good and obedient child, but now I understand that you're different from me. You have the privilege of being willful in the days to come. Be happy and joyful." At that time, Benjamin didn't take these words to heart. He was annoyed by Julia's lectures and resented her control over him.
But now,
as he remembered those words and looked around the large villa, realizing Julia's presence was nowhere to be found, he finally realized and started to feel sad. That evening, when Lawrence came home, Benjamin unusually grabbed his hand. "Dad, did you fight with Mom?" Lawrence stopped and looked down at him. Benjamin's innocent face frowned. "Can you apologize to Mom and make up with her? I haven't seen her in a long time. I want to eat Mom's sweet and sour ribs. Can we have them tonight?" Lawrence looked at Benjamin's expectant face, first expressionless, then slowly revealing a cruel smile. "I didn't fight with her. I divorced her. Do you know what divorce means?" Divorce means she doesn't want you anymore. She will never see you again, no matter what you want to do. She won't care anymore. She abandoned you. Understand? He seemed to enjoy the fear on Benjamin's face and repeated, Benjamin, she doesn't want you anymore. She'll have other children. More obedient and cuter than you. You mean nothing to her now. You're lying. Mom wouldn't abandon me. Benjamin screamed.
You're the one she left. Mom said she loved me the most.
She lied to you. Lawrence laughed. Benjamin, you were deceived. Loved you the most? How you believe that nonsense? Lawrence, what are you saying to the child? The elders of the Jiang family rushed over, quickly holding the distraught Benjamin, comforting him softly. Ben, don't cry. Dad was just joking with you. I want Mom. Mom is busy right now. She went back to her hometown and will be back in a few days. Okay? No, I want to see her now. Benjamin struggled forcefully. Lawrence despised Benjamin's willfulness the most. He watched Benjamin's tantrum indifferently, like an outsider, without a hint of emotion. Even when Benjamin cried so much, he almost vomited. Lawrence just frowned slightly and went upstairs. The bedroom was exactly the same as before Julia left, including the large wedding photo on the wall. Sometimes Lawrence didn't understand his own thoughts. When he and Miranda broke up, he blocked her, deleted her number, threw away all mementos, wishing everything related to her would disappear from his world. But after divorcing Julia, he threw nothing away. As if throwing things away meant losing, he tried hard to keep his emotions stable to prove that Julia's departure didn't affect him at all. He thought it was just a woman he didn't love. Divorce was supposed to be a relief. Half a year after the divorce, Miranda asked him if he wanted to get married. Lawrence was silent for a while and then said, Forget it. Benjamin was still causing a fuss looking for her a few days ago. If I marry you, he'll probably throw a huge tantrum. Miranda looked into his eyes and asked, Are you really not marrying me just because of Benjamin? What else? Miranda laughed, a hint of mockery in her tone. Lawrence, sometimes I admire you. After all, you even deceive yourself. Lawrence didn't understand. What was he deceiving himself about? Epilogue 2. When Benjamin turned 18, Lawrence was still single, but Julia had remarried. She married a programmer, shy and quiet but very kind to her, perhaps out of love for her. The programmer even cared a lot about Benjamin, his stepson. On the wedding day, Benjamin attended the ceremony. When he came back at the dinner table, he mentioned to Lawrence that the atmosphere at the wedding was very nice. With not many guests, but very lively, Lawrence just silently chewed his food, not even bothering to give him a glance. This was the usual way they interacted. There wasn't much affection or conversation between them, just the polite but distant relationship typical of a wealthy family. So Benjamin didn't know that Lawrence also attended the wedding that day. Not only did he go, but he also gave a red envelope. Inside was a bank card. Julia didn't take it.
Keep it.
I know you don't need this, but it's just a little gesture from me. I can't give you anything else. Julia shook her head. You don't need to give me anything. She wore a simple dress, not as grand as her wedding to Lawrence, but her smile was much more genuine. Lawrence looked at her once, and then looked away. He was afraid that if he looked any longer, he would break down in tears and beg Julia not to get married, not to leave him. The dressing room was very quiet. Someone knocked on the door. Is the bride ready? It's time to go on stage. Ready. Julia stood up and asked Lawrence. Ben is outside. Why don't you join us for a meal before you leave?
No.
Lawrence shook his head, stood up, and walked to the door first with his hand on the door handle. Lawrence suddenly spoke. By the way, there's something I've never told you. Ma used to be jealous of Benjamin and Grandma. Julia was surprised. What did you say? Everyone said you loved me deeply, but I always felt that in your heart. Grandma was more important than me. Lawrence's tone was calm, so I was always unhappy. Then Benjamin was born, no matter what we were doing. As soon as Benjamin cried, I ceased to exist in your eyes. Lawrence said, so I always disliked Benjamin, maybe subconsciously. I always wanted all your attention. Lawrence laughed self-deprecatingly. Too bad I wasn't that lucky, so he lost what he originally had too. And I wasn't drunk that night. I was very clear-headed. Lawrence finally turned around and looked at Julia. If you're ever unhappy in the future, come to me anytime. But if you're happy, don't tell me. You know I'm not a good person. Seeing your happiness not involving me, I'd want to ruin it. From the first day, the programmer appeared by Julia's side. Lawrence knew the desire to destroy instantly broke free, like an ugly reptile lurking in the shadows, plotting to ruin Julia's second chance at happiness. But Julia's smile was so beautiful, she looked genuinely happy. Not witnessing Julia and the programmer's wedding was the greatest blessing Lawrence could give. Is it sad? Yes, it's sad. Is it regrettable? Yes, it's regrettable. But no matter how sad or regretful in this lifetime, he and Julia are over. Lawrence thought of the year he first met Julia. He was reluctant to pick up the country bumpkin sent by his grandmother. Just a second before seeing Julia, he was complaining to his friends on his phone. But when he looked up and saw Julia, he almost stopped breathing. She was like a cool breeze, sweeping away all the summer heat, leaving only the sound of cicadas and the dappled sunlight through the trees. The attraction was instantaneous. He did many things he couldn't understand, his eyes unconsciously following her in every moment of life. By the time he realized it, there was no turning back for them. He watched as the sunlight on her gradually faded, shadows growing larger. At that time, he really thought she would stay by his side for life. In a daze, Lawrence seemed to dream. In the dream, he returned to their wedding day. The officiant held the microphone and asked him, "For richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health. Mr. Lawrence, do you take Miss Julia to be your wife?" He heard his own answer. "I do."